My name is Larelda Buckley. My book is Stories from the Sheriff's Daughter, published by TCU Press last year. It follows the life of a 9-year-old girl whose family moves into a Burleson County jail in Texas when her father is elected sheriff. I'm going to be reading today from the first chapter, Alongside Evil. The day had come. I was finally going to see a prisoner, and not just any prisoner. This was not a disturbing the peace or a drunken public. This was murder, and the murderer was on his way to our jail. I'd been hoping to see a real prisoner ever since we'd moved from our dairy farm outside of town into the county jail. Every day of those 3 weeks, I'd been picturing what he'd look like in great detail. I had it clear in my mind. He'd be skinny, hungry looking, with long greasy hair and a mustache. He'd have the bad posture I'd always been warned against, and his clothes would be dirty and look like he'd slept in the trunk of his car. He'd have a tattoo or maybe several, a skull with dripping blood, a coiled snake, or some really bad words. He'd be missing teeth, and those remaining would be brown and discolored from smoking cigarettes and chewing tobacco. And this scary character was about to be locked up in our jail right across the carport from our house. I had moved a chair up to the front window of our living room where I could see everything when I pulled back the curtain. Finally, the black and white patrol car barreled into the driveway, slinging gravel as it skidded to a stop. The highway patrolman leapt from the car, opened the back door, and dragged the prisoner out, leaving the car door swinging open. He was handcuffed, so I knew he was the murderer, but I couldn't believe my eyes. He was just a kid, not more than 16 or 17 years old. He had excellent posture and looked like an athlete. He wore pressed Levi's and a button-down collar shirt. His hair was blonde and short, and he was obviously too young to grow a mustache. Even worse, he was crying. I never expected to see a prisoner cry. Mama came up beside me, blinking back tears of her own. She always cried when any of us kids cried, and now I worried she might cry when anybody did. If that was true, this jail life was going to be hard on her. Nobody slept that night much in the jail. Daddy made calls from his office, Mama walked the floor, and the boy cried in his cell. I listened to it all. When we'd moved into the jail 3 weeks before, my grandmother, looking over the cardboard box she carried toward the barred windows, said to my mother, "Is it wise, girl, moving in alongside evil?" My mother actually laughed, but it sounded possible and maybe prophetic and a little scary to me. I was about as excited that day as only a 9-year-old could be, and now here we were, a murderer in our jail. Next morning, I walked out the kitchen door, headed for my dreaded piano lesson. It had come a norther during the night, so I was bundled up in my heavy coat. The yard surrounding the jail side of our house was enclosed with a tall chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. I'd always thought it was a little too much for the Burleson County Jail, but not this morning. We had a murderer in there. There he was, hanging his arm out through the bars as far as he could, waving at me furiously. Little girl, little girl." His voice sounded hoarse and he was crying again. "Please call my mother for me. She'll get me out of here. I'll give you the number." Here I was, talking to a murderer. He was all the way across the jail yard, but I could see him and I could hear him. I clutched the fence, squeezing the impression of the chain links into my fingers. I could feel my heart beating up in my neck like before I went to the dentist, and my teeth were clicking together. I couldn't find my voice. The boy seemed calmer now that he had my attention. He looked me right in the eyes for the first time and started to cry again. Though I wanted to look away, I didn't, because here he was talking about his mother. My heart started to shift out of my ears back into its rightful place. He went on, "I didn't even know if that gun was loaded," he said from the window. "I just wanted to check, but I didn't really know how. I never meant to hurt anybody. It just went off. I just needed gas money." I didn't say a word, but I was thinking how he was sounding pretty far from a murderer. He sounded like a dumb kid who didn't know how to check if a gun was loaded, something even I could do. I'd never been in trouble before, he said, like he didn't want me to think bad of him. Not much of a desperado. "Do you have any tattoos?" I asked him. No, his lips lifted into a small smile. He not only had all his teeth, but they were pearly white and straight. He probably hadn't had his braces off for very long. He looked like he was about to grin, but instead started crying again. Call my mother, please. He sounded like a little kid now, sniffling and whining. Me, I was thinking he didn't sound like your usual murderer, and I was wondering if there was even such a thing as a usual murderer. While he cried and cried, I felt like I might cry myself. I turned away. Over my shoulder, I said, I'll talk to my dad. I hadn't seen desperation before, and I wanted to get away from it fast. The kitchen was warm and cozy with Daddy at the table pouring coffee from the percolator. He was dressed in his usual suit and tie and didn't look like he had been up all night. His black wavy hair was still damp from the shower. It was longer than most men wore it, and it had a permanent crease where his Stetson fit around his head. Even after that terrible night we'd all had, his gray eyes were clear. The wrinkles around them, which Mama said were from smiling too much, were deeper than usual, but softened as he smiled at me. That boy wants us to call his mother, I said. I was just going out to talk to him, Daddy said. I talked to his parents last night and again this morning. His daddy said they tried everything to keep him out of trouble. Now he's made his bed and he can lie in it. What does Mama say? He said call her. She just cried. Daddy sighed a really heavy sigh, put his hand on my shoulder and gave it a little squeeze. I thought again that there was going to be a lot of crying around here. We walked out together slowly into the cold. The sky was gray and threatening rain. I could tell Daddy was dreading talking to the boy by how slow he was moving, how quiet he was, and how he was not teasing me about my piano playing like he usually would. I hurried on up the street. I knew when Daddy told him, because I heard that boy wail out loud like he'd been hit hard and was using his last breath to do it. Like it. My breath caught in my throat, and the chill I felt running through my body was not from the cold wind. Late that night, I lay awake in my bed, listening to the boy sobbing and crying for his mother, who never did come. My own mother was walking the hall from the kitchen and back. Daddy went out to comfort the boy several times in the night. I started to think about what my grandmother had said that first day, but I think we knew by now we weren't going to be living alongside evil. We were going to be living alongside pain. Chapter 2, Fool for Love. Our crying prisoner accused of murder was called Billy Ewell. Turned out he was the most popular boy in his high school. The boys wanted to be his friend, and all the girls, we would soon find out, wanted to be his girlfriend. He had indeed been an athlete, a football star, caught the winning touchdown pass in the district title game. But in our jail, he was merely a crying boy that Mama was trying to comfort with macaroni and cheese and chicken and dumplings, and my daddy with a kind word when it looked like his mama wasn't going to come for him. My brother Bill began standing for hours at Billy's cell window in the jail yard, and like most people did, had gotten to like him. He ran errands for Billy, tried to call people, repeated it around the breakfast table as he listened to Billy's stories. But at the first, Billy was beyond comfort, cried and cried, right up until the reporters came. The Bryan Daily Eagle had discovered that Billy Ewell, football star, was in our jail. And from the first day's coverage, he was Billy the Kid Ewell, and featured in articles almost every day with a favorable slant. The fact that he was charged with murder was overshadowed by his football career, and in his own words, he had only been along for the ride. After the articles appeared, carloads of girls from Bryan drove by the jail every day, pulling up in the feed store lot, yelling at Billy through the fence. Finally, after Mr. Seifert at the feed store complained, Daddy moved Billy to cell number 3 on the street side so the girls could park on Fawn Street, right by the fence. My mother worried that these girls' mothers didn't know they were hanging on a jail fence in the next county talking to an accused murderer, even if it was a big mix-up like the paper said. Even more worrisome for Mama, mothers drove their daughters up to the jail to see the prisoner, smiling and laughing with them themselves. There were so many phone calls for Billy in the first days, like they thought we'd go out and get him to come into the house for a chat. or that he might have a phone in his cell as if it were a hotel. I myself took several messages for him, writing them out on a message pad like I did for my dad. Finally, Daddy put a stop to those phone calls. Only emergency messages were to be taken for prisoners. Wasn't long before they all lost interest anyway. The Bryan Daily Eagle, the carloads of girls, the phone calls all slowed and finally stopped. There were 3 or 4 diehards, girls Billy probably wouldn't have been interested in when he was a free man. Finally, after his arraignment and after the papers quit writing about him every day, only one girl remained, Larelda. She was true blue. She had come the first day and every day after, waiting out the carloads of Bryan girls when they were hogging all the room at the fence. And now finally she had the place to herself. She even tried to bail Billy out of jail. She worked after school at the Cannonball Cafe and had more money than most girls her age, money of her own. She went to the area preachers to see if they would help, but with the shine worn off Billy's story, they wouldn't help her. She contacted a big city bail bondsman from Houston, but couldn't raise enough cash. She made a last-ditch effort going to Billy's absent parents, begging them to put their house up as collateral. They refused and never once came to visit their son. Larelda's efforts failed, so he became our first long-term prisoner in the months before his trial. Our whole family got to know him pretty well. Mama knew he liked his eggs over easy in the morning with grits and bacon. Daddy knew, kept up with his court dates and lawyer visits. Bill stood vigil at the cell window. Even I said hi as I passed his window. We all got to know Larelda too. She bought Billy Marlboros and Snickers, his favorites. She came every day at lunch and right after school. She'd drive up after work at the Cannonball and stay late into the night to keep him company. Despite her attentions, Billy Ewell did not seem grateful. I'd heard him talk real mean to her. Even my brother Bill thought Billy was rough on Larelda, and my brother Bill was far and away the meanest talker I'd ever come in contact with, at least when he and I fought, so I thought he'd be a fair judge. At the cell window, Bill asked Billy why he was so mean to Larelda. She don't mind, Billy said. She don't expect any better. She's that kind of girl. Bill wanted me to know he was quoting Billy so I wouldn't correct his grammar. I was hurt for Larelda. Everybody, even a fool, likes a kind word, and I told Bill as much. Then Bill said something that made me think he might not be such a lost cause after all. He said, well, that Larelda is a fool for love. Even though Larelda kept on spending her waitress tips on him, Billy got more and more surly as the days went by. He'd snap at her if she brought the wrong cigarettes. He was a chain smoker by now, and his teeth were even getting a little brown. And he would call her moron or trailer trash, or even worse if she let his hamburger get cold before she got it up there after work. Got so bad that my mother sat me down for a talk about how I should never let anyone speak to me that way. She was so upset she had Daddy talk to Billy about how other people could hear him. Late one night when the jail lights were off, I heard Larelda by the fence in the dark. Don't worry, Billy, I'll be right here. It's all gonna be okay. I'll be right here. I love you. It was the sweetest talk I thought that jail yard had ever heard or would ever hear. Billy must have felt it too, because he called out, I love you. The words rang across the yard where Larelda was hanging on, you might say, for dear life. From my bed, I imagined she might go right over the fence, barbed wire be damned, to get closer to the boy she loved. When Billy's trial finally came up, he wouldn't let Larelda attend. She'd sit in her car pulled up by the jail yard fence, waiting for him to be brought back in handcuffs and tell her about his day in court. Larelda talked to Daddy. Do you think his lawyer's any good? To my mother, how does it look for him? She even asked me and my brother Bill for reports, and we knew less than she did. If the truth be known, it was going exceptionally well for Billy Ewell. He had a good lawyer who had been a football fan of Billy's and was working pro bono. There was not a lot of evidence against Billy himself, and he told his own story convincingly. And people liked him, seemed to believe what he said. They'd go off talking about what a good kid he was. Too bad he was in such a bad strait. Some of the old gang of girls started showing up in court, including Sarah Seeley, a rich girl he had been going out with before this whole ordeal started. She could have bailed him out of jail with her makeup money alone, my grandma said.